It is officially January 2025, and in a few days, the Trump administration is going to start all over again. And I want to spend the time in this video breaking down the 5 things that he can do in the first week that can greatly impact immigrants in the U.S. And a lot of these things do not require congressional action. So that's why I wanted to do this video, to break down what those things are, to show you that he doesn't really need a lot of congressional action to get a lot of things done and do a lot of damage. So let's get into it. I am U.S. immigration attorney Lilian, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. The purpose of this video is not to scare you, but to give you information, because the more information you have, the better you are able to act and protect yourself and your family. So let's talk about the 5 things that I believe that is coming up with the Trump administration and that you should be prepared for if you fall into any of these categories. The first thing that the Trump administration can do without congressional help, without congressional action, is to end DACA. If you have DACA or you have family members that have DACA, you probably have been following this whole story. DACA right now is in litigation. There's an appeal going on because the Texas court said that DACA was unconstitutional. The Biden administration have appealed that decision, and we are waiting for a final decision from the appeals court. Right? That's the status of DACA today. If you already were approved of DACA, you can still renew your DACA. However, new applications are being accepted. However, USCIS is not allowed to approve new DACA applications. They can only renew the ones that they already had approved. So, how can the Trump administration use this to basically end DACA? If the appeals court comes back and agrees with the Texas court and says that DACA is unconstitutional, the Trump administration can just choose to not appeal the decision. Remember, the government was sued, and the government has to fight the case. If the government under the Trump administration decides not to fight a denial of their case, right? The government filed an appeal, right? The government filed an appeal. If the court comes and denies the appeal, the government has the choice to file an additional appeal to the Supreme Court. Under the Trump administration, I can almost guarantee you that they will not be filing that appeal if the court comes back and denies the government's appeal to let DACA continue. I can almost guarantee you that they are not going to file an appeal to the Supreme Court. They're just going to agree with the circuit court and leave it alone. And if the circuit court denies the appeal, that means DACA is over. There's no renewal. There's no new applications. So that is a way that they can literally end DACA without having to actually do any executive action or anything like that. They can just choose not to appeal. On the flip side, President-elect Trump has said that he would be willing to work with Democrats to figure out a solution for the Dreamers. What that solution may be, we don't know. We do not have any details of what he would want to do for Dreamers. We will need to wait and see if he actually takes any action to help the hundreds of thousands of Dreamers in the U.S., right? We have to wait to see what he chooses to do with that. However, they do not need congressional action to choose not to appeal the decision. The second thing that the Trump administration can do without congressional action is to have a higher enforcement of the public charge rule. The public charge rule requires that someone that's a beneficiary of an immigrant visa or a permanent residency will not become a public charge, will not need governmental assistance. In order to show this, typically you just need your petitioner to file an affidavit of support. And if their income is not enough, to have a joint sponsor also file an affidavit of support for you. Under the first Trump administration, they made this rule even stricter. They had higher requirements of the person that's the beneficiary. So even with an affidavit of support showing that your petitioner or the co-sponsor has enough income to support you if you need it, they will make it harder. So under the first Trump administration, they required you to file a form saying that you, the beneficiary, will be self-sufficient. So for example, if you are filing for your parent and your parent is 80 years old, retired, and has no income, they will be considered to potentially be a public charge, and you may need to provide more documentation of income and ability to support them, right? And they can use their age and their lack of income and lack of ability to basically work to say that they will eventually probably become a public charge, therefore they should not get a green card. So it's really a stricter standard, but when it comes to those things, it is up to the presidency because it is a policy issue and not a law issue. The law says you're not to become a public charge. The presidency decides. The administration gets to decide what you need to show to prove that you will not become a public charge. So that is one thing that Congress already said you need to not be a public charge. Now it's up to the executive branch, which is the president, to decide what you need to show to prove that you will not become a public charge. So that is another place where they can act on day one, right? They can do an executive action. They can choose to do rulemaking, but that is something that can definitely change. This can be an internal policy memo to USCIS officers on how to review affidavit of support and to review the person's ability to be self-sufficient. The third thing that the Trump administration wants to do is to eliminate TPS for certain countries, specifically Haiti. It's really important to know that they can do this without congressional action because TPS designation is strictly executive branch action, right? So it's really important to know this, that they can choose to end TPS, either rescind TPS or not renew and redesignate a country for TPS. So it will be best if they choose not to redesignate a country, because that just means if you already have it, you will just let it run its course. And whenever that, expiration date is, it ends and nothing else happens, right? But if they choose to rescind the TPS that's already in place, that means if you currently have TPS and you're from that country, you are now out of any lawful status in the U.S. As of March 2024, there are over 860,000 people in the U.S. from 16 countries who are under TPS, right? 860,000 people. So when it comes to the impact that eliminating TPS can have on families, on individuals, this is a lawful status. Let's be very clear on when we talk about TPS. TPS is a temporary protected status. It is a lawful status that you are in the U.S. So by eliminating it, either by rescinding the TPS or not redesignating the country for TPS, you are basically causing people from the countries that you choose not to redesignate or you choose to rescind, causing them to now to be out of status again. And if the person does not have another means to gain status, now they are out of work because they will not have a work authorization, and they will not have any lawful status in the U.S. The fourth thing that the Trump administration has stated that they want to do is to expand the interior enforcement. This means enforcing immigration laws within the US, right? So ICE being more active, being more proactive, going after people, not just people coming into the US at the borders, but also people already in the US. So ICE would now have a wider scope of people to enforce, right? Under the Biden administration, they had priority for recent arrivals, people with criminal records, people with trafficking records, things like that. But under the new Trump administration, they're basically saying anyone can get it, okay? If you are in the US and you're undocumented, even if you have family here, even if you have children here, you can be subject to their enforcement. And what does this enforcement look like? It looks like mass detention. So they say mass deportation. But remember, if you watch my video on mass deportation, in order for them to remove that many people from the US, they will need to find them, detain them, have them go through some form of process. If they've been in the US for more than 2 years, they have to go through the removal process, which is going through immigration court. They may speed up those cases to make it go faster, but they still have to go through a process. And while they're going through that process, they will have to hold the people somewhere. So that's why I say mass detention and then going through the immigration process to get them a deportation order and then get them out of the US. So it's really important to understand what that looked like. So it's not just everyone is going to be swept up and, overnight, all the undocumented immigrants in the US are going to be picked up and put somewhere, right? That's not how it's going to work. In this video, we're talking about the vision that the Trump administration has, not really what they can legally do, but they plan on doing this without any congressional action by declaring a state of emergency, right? A national state of emergency, and using that as a premise to basically do whatever they want when it comes to immigration enforcement within the US. And that will most likely include using the military as, the detention, in the detention centers. Part of the plan when it comes to this mass detention and, rounding up of people, again, it's going to vary, right? What they can actually do versus what they want to do are two different things. But in their plan, in their vision, it's about rounding up as many people as possible, using the military to do this, and having a place for them to be detained, not have them, released and go to court, but have them detained the whole time that they have a court case going on. Because if you have someone detained, your case is going to go faster than if you are out in public. So it's really important that you understand why I say mass detention, not really mass deportation anymore. Because again, if you watch my mass deportation video, if you are detained, your immigration court case is going to move way faster, like months versus years if you are not detained. So that's why the detention is such a big part of that plan. The final thing that the Trump administration wants to do without any congressional action is to end birthright citizenship for children of some immigrants, right? It's not everyone, right? They are basically making a second-class citizens, and they're basically saying, if you meet these requirements, you can have birthright citizenship. But if you don't meet these requirements, you do not have birthright citizenship. But here's the problem, though. The Constitution, that's the problem. So the Constitution says that anyone born in the U.S. or within U.S. territory is a U.S. citizen. It does not differentiate between who the parents are, right? The parents' legal status in the U.S. is not even in consideration when they talk about birthright citizenship in the Constitution. In order for this to become actual law, right, congressional action is needed. However, the Trump administration has said that they plan on doing this with an executive action. Here's why I don't take this too serious, right? Here's why, we in the immigration world hear this all the time. Like, he said this on his first term as president. He's saying it again, and he wants to put more action towards it this time around. But here's the problem. This is a constitutional right. It's not like, public charge rule, right? It's not TPS. This is a constitutional right. And in order to take away a constitutional right, Congress has to get involved, or the Supreme Court has to get involved. So most likely what's going to happen is he's going to sign the executive order. There's going to be a lawsuit. Yes, there's going to be a lawsuit, and it's just going to be tied up in lawsuit. That's what's going to happen. Do I see this changing immediately? No, he's not going to be able to do this and have it take effect immediately, because part of a lawsuit is whoever's suing the government for him signing that executive order is going to ask for this rule to be on hold, right? So I don't see that happening in the first weeks, the first month, right? There's going to be a lawsuit, and the lawsuit is going to most likely determine whether he will be able to do this or not without congressional action. Now, if he's able to get Congress to actually pass this constitutional amendment, okay, this is not just a law that's going to be passed. This is the constitutional amendment that needs to be passed by Congress, which typically requires 2/3 of Congress. We'll see, right? We'll see if that is even possible. But this video, again, is about what they want to do without congressional assistance and congressional action. So it's in their wish list. We'll see what happens with it. But this one is one of the harder things for them to do without congressional action, because it is so ripe for litigation. And by that, I mean, it's something that will immediately have a lawsuit if he signs the executive order, right? Immediately have a lawsuit. Immediately ask for the rule not to be enforced until a final decision is made in the case, like immediately. So that's one of the ones that I'm not super like, that's going to happen immediately. But it is something they want to do without congressional action. So again, this video is not to scare you. It's not to make you, run and hide, because part of, being informed, if you watch my video on the things you can do to prepare for the Trump administration, is being prepared, being informed, knowing what may be coming so that you can plan ahead for it. So if you have DACA, right, you can plan ahead knowing that this is something that could happen under the Trump administration. This lawsuit could be finalized. And if they do not file an appeal, you need to be able to have an alternative means of getting status, or at least have a plan for it, right? If TPS ends, you need to at least have a plan for what you would do next. So this is all things you need to know if any of this could apply to you, so that you can then start making plans, figuring out what the next best step for you is. And if there is something else you qualify for, you can start the planning process and start filing those things, right? So if you are in a space where one of these things apply to you, you are worried about, TPS ending, DACA ending, the public charge rule possibly coming back right when you're trying to file for a family member that may not be able to work, well, go ahead and reach out to me. Let's schedule a strategy session, talk about your situation, and see if there's a way that I can help you with your case. If there is, then we'll talk about that. If there's not, I will let you know, because the point of the strategy session is to figure out what you qualify for and how we can help you make that a reality. If you would like to schedule a strategy session with me, go to my website, lilylegal.com, and click on Contact Us, and you'll be able to pick a date and time that works best for you for us to speak. You can also call my office at 508-443-1788.